Welcome back to Med Twitter this week. I'm Chris the Chiu Man Chiu. I've got a great tweet from Dr. Shruti Patel I want to share with you, but I'll catch up with you after the intro. I have Dr. Shruti Patel here today, and her tweet this week was directed at an article from the American Heart Association, so I'll read this really quick. At American Heart published this 2020 arguing against affirmative action and stating diversity doesn't save lives. There are many reasons why this piece is harmful, outlined by Med Twitter, and she references Trisha Ray Pendergast's tweet from August 2nd, but I want to focus on the fact that the author was of Asian descent. So, Dr. Patel, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I find this it's actually a very interesting discussion because I am of Asian descent, and so are you.
Yep.
And so, can you tell me a little bit about what this article from American Heart Association was about, and then what your thoughts are and what made you write this tweet?
Yeah. So like you said, the Journal of American Heart Association, they published this paper essentially advocating against affirmative action in cardiology programs. And really, at first glance, when you read kind of the title and the abstract, it seems like it's going to be a review paper, looking at diversity and inclusion policies, and then really considering further solutions to the ongoing issues of underrepresentation. And then as you kind of read the body of the text, that's where kind of more of these ideas come out. And he really states that racial and ethnic preferences for Black and Latinx people result in weaker academic standing. And he makes that statement. He goes on to say that many of them don't attain academic success. And this is wildly troublesome, that, something like statements like that were published in, a prestigious academic journal. And the part, and then you go on, you continue to read, and a large part of what his narrative is that in regards to how Asians specifically are affected by affirmative action. And he also penned a piece in Jack last year, another very prestigious journal, in regards to increasing representation of underrepresented minorities. And he specifically calls out that Asians were not included, even though it's part of one of the three smallest minority groups. So that's kind of the backdrop of his current article and really what kind of prompted me to write this tweet and this thread.
Now, I recently had a talk with Dr. Stetson, and we were talking in regards to online learning about equity versus equality. And so I feel that talking about affirmative action, in whatever form you think of it, I think right. Also that the term also brings up some of its own issues. But that actually has to deal closely with that. And I know you have a lot of interest in equity as well. Do you want to explain a little bit about that?
Right. So, I guess, equality is, if you look at the numbers or, there's like really great graphics of, you lift everyone up equally, that's equality, right? But equity is when we're talking about, we have to look at the entire situation and how do we fight, right? And this is a fight. It's not like, something that we can do passively. It's like, how do we fight for equity and like making sure that people have access to the same resources, the same opportunities, and the same opportunities of success. It's not about, a lot of people are hardworking. People can be equally hardworking, and not just because they don't have resources, they don't have opportunities, they don't have access, they aren't getting to the same places. And that's what we're really fighting for,
Gotcha. Now, what are your thoughts on his discussion that is actually harming people of Asian descent? Is this real? Is this something we actually need to be worried about? I feel we're an overrepresented minority, honestly, especially in this area.
Right. So one of my tweets, like kind of later on, I talk about how Asians represent roughly like 5% of the population, but we represent more than 15%. I think it's around 17, if I remember off the top of my head, of physicians. Some people send me an article, have sent me articles about how Patel is the most common doctor last name in the United States. People love to tell me that, but we're represented, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I think when we're looking at the word underrepresented, and he always uses air quotes when he talks about, or real quotes, underrepresented minorities, and we just aren't that in medicine. Now, if we're talking about affirmative action kind of as a whole, I think it's important to recognize that we are underrepresented in certain places, in CEOs, in the boardrooms. There's places that affirmative action helps us as Asians, because affirmative action is looking for diversity. And so the comments that he's making about medicine, I just don't think are true, because we aren't underrepresented. And so that's kind of what I feel about his comments about that.
Gotcha. So I want to sort of dig in a little more about the discussion in the Black and Latinx communities, and his the views and the data that he brings off that that it's not improving the quality because these minorities are failing or something. But what are your thoughts on that? And is he misguided? Is this true? Is this actually more of a representation of the inherent racial biases that we have that's making it difficult for them to succeed already? And so therefore, even though we have affirmative action, we still haven't improved equity enough that they can succeed.
So first of all, I mean, seeing for pre-meds, for medical students, seeing an article like this published in a prominent journal, that causes harm, like very clear harm. And I think that is important to know. So much of, even going through medical school and being a resident is confidence, and how we talk about imposter syndrome all the time, and how it actually affects your day-to-day practice. And so, I mean, first and foremost, articles like this, and even, and people in high positions of power having thoughts like this is harmful. His thoughts about diversity not improving care, I think it's also very misguided. And I think that, I'm Asian. And so I have had experiences with patients that were very meaningful because I was Asian. Not only was I Asian, I was Indian. One of the most meaningful experiences I had in residency, and I felt like I had done the most good for someone, and I can pinpoint that moment. And it was when I was caring for an Indian man with a terrible disease. And I was able to use the fact that I was Indian and just aspects of my culture to make his days in the hospital and his entire family's days in the hospital a little bit easier. And the fact is that there is no board score that is high enough that can replace that interaction. It's just not possible. And so to say that, these numbers that, you have to be have this MCAT score, and you have to have, it just doesn't correlate with how well of a doctor you're going to be and how well you're going to be able to take care of patients. And I truly, truly believe that. And they've proven that with step one. They've proven that how well you memorize doesn't mean you're going to be a great doctor. So
the big question is, he's using these outcomes in his study or his research, right, and he's presenting this. I mean, are these even reasonable use? Is he using these outcomes reasonably, or are we just is he looking at the wrong thing? What's your counter argument to this, to how he's presented the study, and how would you do it different?
I mean, so his current study, I feel like I wouldn't even call it a study, okay, right? I would call it, I feel like in this
article,
paper. Thank you. He's cherry picking information, using things on Student Doctor, citing himself, which, people cite themselves all the time. There's no problem with that. But I think that he's using information that, and there will always be a citation out there that will prove your point. And that's a fact. It's kind of like with even
hydroxychloroquine for COVID-19.
I was like, there's a study, and but you have to look at the caliber of the study, how if it's a randomized placebo-controlled trial. I know Dr. Fauci says that all the time, and so yes, you can find evidence to back your data, and we've read enough papers that we know that, right? But to critically assess a study using evidence-based medicine, I don't believe it, I guess, is really the bottom line.
So you actually gave me a couple other tweets that you thought were interesting over the last week, and going back to sort of talking about MCAT scores and so forth, you presented a tweet by Eve Bowers, and I'll read this really quick. Let's get over this idea that medical schools owe us applicants admission based on high test scores. They owe society well-trained and diverse physician workforce that is representative of the population. This is and always has been about doing right by patients. Why did you pick this? How is this related to everything else we've been talking about today?
Yeah, so I picked that tweet because it really, it kind of highlights what I was kind of saying earlier about the board scores. It's like sometimes we as medical society, we've fixated on these numbers, and you get this MCAT score, you get this step 1 score, and then you get to go into this tier, and there's it tells you how smart you are, and I know that my board scores contributed a lot to how I perceived myself, and I think that in itself is problematic because, like I mentioned before, your board score is not going to tell you the kind of doctor you're going to be. Right. It's the things that you do for patients, right? It's like holding their hand and being there for them, because the fact is that you're going to learn how to be a good doctor in medical school and in residency, because you have people around you in medical education like yourself, like training you to be, come up with differential diagnosis and come to the conclusion and take care of patients. It's the part that you can't really learn from an educator that really separates the doctors from like the good and the best. And I think that that's not something that you can do with a test score. And so that tweet really, like, I don't know, I saw it and hit home.
Do you think we're getting there? I mean, I see this, slowly change, now step 1 scores, I mean, we're not going to see it. It's right. It's going to be pass fail. So right. Our residency programs, as they're looking at potential residency applicants, it's not even something that they even need to concern themselves with, because it literally won't be there.
Right. So, I mean, the step 1 thing I've tweeted about this, I have mixed feelings about, for the sole reason that I worry that there's going to be more emphasis on research and more stress. And I think it's going to disadvantage certain applicants that kind of sometimes use step scores as like a door. But I'm hoping that overall we're moving towards a place where we are looking at an applicant and seeing what else they bring to the table. And I think that we have slowly been moving there. I think that, I had a very incredible and, medical school class, and some of my colleagues, have a diverse life experiences, which I think will make them better doctors. So I think we're moving there, and I think articles like this don't help. Gotcha.
So do you think in the future we should be also abolishing MCAT scores too, make it pass fail? Do you think that would help?
I've been reading I've been reading some tweets about that and waiving the MCAT, and I didn't know anything about this before, I would say 2 days ago, so I'm not going to make an educated kind of judgment, but seeing how they also are poorly correlated. And the fact is that if you can pay for an MCAT course, your score is going to be better, right? Right. I was privileged, and I, was able to pay for, I think it was Princeton Review. It was like a 6-week-long course, and I was able to invest that money. And I think it's unfair if we're trying to make this a more diverse experience. I don't think a high MCAT score tells you, once again, how smart a person is. I think it tells you how much they can take a test, use their resources, all of those things. But I recognize that there's also, there's an argument that there needs to be something that tells programs that you can go through med school. I wish I had a better answer for you, and I don't know what it looks like, but I've been thinking about it, and I'm going to read a little bit more before I come up with a stance.
All right. And honestly, I've been seeing a lot of tweets from London Robinson. She goes by, she used to just go by @Ruminate, and she's a medical student who really has been really being advocates for all medical students, especially in this time when a lot of them, or even pre-meds, are having difficulty getting their MCATs done, the stress about getting your step 1s done, right. And, talking about health and racial disparities. Right. So I really would encourage you guys to follow her, because she's very, very vocal and a great advocate for people in that regard.
So we just met over Twitter, and
did you?
Incredibly inspiring. seeing the way she is advocating for, you know, just for kind of humanity, and but also like rural areas of Minnesota, and kind of it's not just, you know, racial and gender equality, but also equality with in terms of like access to online internet for schools and things like that. And so she's really opened my eyes to a lot of things that I wouldn't even have considered. So I agree, follow her. She'll probably be in the mentions.
Yep.
She's incredible.
And next thing you talk to her, tell her to answer my DMs if she wants to do an interview, because I've
I'll
asked her.
definitely tell her that.
She gave me the cold shoulder, so I don't know.
I'll definitely tell her that. She's very busy, you know, fighting for what's right.
I'd love to have her on. I really wanted to show the audience the last tweet that you presented was from Jack. It was Shina. It says, in the years since I have taken the No Manels pledge, this is the first time I've ever had to send this email. But I took the pledge, I raised the issue up front, and now I'm honor bound to follow through. The global pandemic is no time for old boys clubs plus exclusionary science. And this has to do a little bit with being on panels with all men. Is that right?
Yes. So the reason why I wanted to highlight that tweet is because I was just in awe that someone not only, you know, made the stance of that I'm not going to be on Manels, but and then brought it up front. But then once they didn't kind of comply, kind of pulled himself out of an opportunity that could have been good for him, really to stand up, because ultimately, you know, I am very interested in gender equality also. And I think a lot of times, you know, we can be raising our voices for women, but really it's that he for she. It's when men also stand up and say, hey, this isn't right. There's extremely qualified women in this field. I think that's incredibly powerful, and actually like makes a large impact. And so I wanted to highlight that tweet. That tweet made me smile, not because obviously I'd prefer it not have happened, but to feel like you have an ally, to feel like someone is really like, I'm willing to give something up to fight for what's right, I thought was really cool.
I love it. And, you know, he literally has a screen cap of this email that he sends, and I might steal it too. I mean, I'm not to the point where I'm asked on a lot of panels. Recently I've been asked on a couple, but sure. I should ask who else is going to be on those panels, because sometimes you get asked, you don't know who's going to be on the panel either.
Right.
And sometimes that changes the last minute too. So sometimes you can't help that. But I think being conscious of that and being a man who could be asked, I think this is something that I need to be aware of as well. So, you know, if my career progresses to a point where I do get asked for these things, I'm
sure
definitely going to keep this in mind.
I'm sure it will.
I do have a couple of tweets of my own that I want to share with the audience.
Yes.
One is from my friend Rohan, who does the YouTube channel Midlife Crisis. He had a really philosophical type episode that came up recently about when does life actually end? And he talks about the time when he was taking care of a patient who was on ECMO. And basically, and they went through a heart-lung transplant. And at this time, they were still alive, but there's no heart or lungs in the chest. And like, it's one of my favorite episodes of his recently, and I'm sure actually most people probably listen or watch him already. So, but I would definitely follow him on Twitter as well. And next, my last tweet that I wanted to show for this week is from my friend Kate Grant. So she works with me on the Curbsiders. She is our artist. She has painted many of our covers for our cover art, and she has recently done a bunch of portraits of her colleagues who are on the front lines. So nurses, doctors, I think she even has sanitation workers. And she took these pictures and she's been slowly polishing these beautiful works of art. And she has been finally picked up by, I think, the BBC and a couple other papers, and they've done stories on her, and she's had a couple of tweets with some beautiful pictures recently, and I'm gonna just make sure I link them all below, because if you're not following Kate Grant on Twitter and on Instagram and not enjoying her beautiful artwork that's on the covers for all our Curbsider episodes, you are missing out. So I really encourage people to check that out. So before I go, Dr. Patel, is there anything you want to let the audience know about? Is there anything you want to plug? Anything else?
No, I think that about covered it. Thank you so much for having me and talking about this really important topic.
No, and thanks for coming at very, very short notice. I believe I only DM'd you yesterday. So I appreciate you being able to on a dime do an interview with me. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope we can do some more in the future.
Of course, anytime. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys for following along. Like I've said in every episode, please like, subscribe, comment below on whichever platform we're on. We're on YouTube, Twitter, or Periscope, Apple Podcasts, and all the fun places you get your podcasts. I don't have anything else. See you guys next week.